I'm Steven.
And I'm Will, and this is the PostP
PostP
Chronicles.
Chronicles.
Hey, what up, say? Yeah.
Will, who do we got today?
Man, today we have an incredible guest. I say it all the time, and I mean it. This is a good friend of mine. He has seen my entire journey from the beginning, and he was a groomsman at my wedding. So, suffice to say, he's a really important person in my life. Now, you'll see and hear his story right here, right now. But before we get into that, if you like these stories, if you like what we're doing, make sure that you like, make sure you share, and most importantly, make sure you subscribe so we can keep telling these transformative, amazing stories. So, with that being said, let me introduce Mathew Edwards. Edwards, what's going on? I say Edwards because that's what we used to call you, right?
I know,
So
right?
I have to call you. But Matt, what's up, man? Welcome to Post P. How you doing?
Good, good. Good morning. Glad you finally made it on here and yeah, excited to share a little bit of my story and see where it goes.
Man, an amazing story it is. So let's start with where are you from? Where did you grow up?
So there was two cities I feel like I grew up the most that are significant. I'm originally from Los Angeles and I was raised in Inglewood, California and Hawthorne, California, which is right next to it. When I was a little bit younger, I feel like the first 3 years or something, there was a time my mom lived in South Central, but I don't really remember that part. I just kind of remember Inglewood and Hawthorne, and it's a trip. Like when you think about like basketball, right? I lived down the street, like from the Forum, like 5 minutes from the Forum, the original Forum where the Lakers played. In that time, like in the 80s. So. Um, Yeah, grew up down there. So I was an only child. Um, I grew up raised by my mother, who's Irish, black, whom I've never met.
So then one
And
more time because you cut out on us. So you said you were only child raised by
yeah,
your mom.
I was the only child raised by my mother, who's Irish, and I never met my like so. Um, and never met or had any siblings, never like met any relatives. And yeah, I
Man,
guess I'll just like dive into that. Like my mom was originally from Washington and it sounded like they kind of tried they forced like Catholic services on her or whatnot, or she's Irish. And I don't know what was going on, but she ended up just like leaving her family. And uh years later, I want to say when I was probably about like 7 or 8, I remember some lady calling and I picked up the phone and then I talked to her. She was, and I was like, Mom, it's for you. And then I just saw like my mom's face change and then like
mm,
her body language changed. And I was like, who was that? She was like, that was your grandmother.
wow.
And I was like, I ain't never, grandmother, who's that? Like, where's she at? Long story short, they basically like were told her, you can come over here, but you can keep your nigger baby over there, like just keeping it
Wow.
raw and uncut. So with that
Wow.
said, all I've ever known, like I said, growing up was my mom. So there was that element of like not knowing other parts of my family or whatnot. So
Let
So
me ask
Matt,
you
let
about
me
that. Go ahead. Go ahead,
I
Stephen.
was gonna ask, so the 80s in LA, that was also during the crack epidemic, right? So how is that affecting you? And obviously your mom, and obviously there's racism affecting you early on. How's all that kind of culminating in your life? Or are you just unaware of it because you're just a kid?
there was a time where I was unaware. But then I became very aware because, like I said, when we were living in Inglewood, like, like like you said, right? This white lady like pushing me around. I got a little afro, you know what I mean? People were looking at us different. And I can remember getting robbed. Like I was in a
Mm,
baby stroller and the dude came up, with a strap and was like, give me your money. And my mom was like, ah, you know what I mean? And she gave him the money. So there was another time, just you hear some gunshots in the middle of the night, and police are pounding on the door, and then they open the door, and like in the middle of the street, like 20, 30 feet, you just see a dead body. Um, and I can remember another time, we lived in like this apartment complex in Inglewood, and my mom was partying. Like you said, it's the 80s. They're smoking, primos, maybe they're using coke, they're drinking, they got the barbecue going, and somebody threw me in the pool, and I didn't know how to swim. And
Mm.
somehow I started like doggy paddling. Somebody was like, "Hey, get the kid." And so it was just, yeah, it was a lot of like crazy things like that that I feel like I became desensitized to. It was like the normal, right? And you're right, like that crack era was raw back then. Like it was serious. When it hit, you could see normal people, right, functioning, and next thing you know, like they're on the side of the street. They're trying to play you for their money. They run up in houses just doing like super crazy things because they are chasing that high. And it just was like spread fast. It was like an epidemic for sure.
That's wild. So how did that resonate with you? Because I'm hearing all the things that you witnessed, and then not having a father doesn't sound like you had a male, role model in your life. So how was that for a kid, 10, 11 years old, seeing all of this with no real guidance? How was that for you? How did you take to that?
Honestly, I don't know. Sometimes I look back and I'm like, man, like that was some crazy stuff, and I like recall like different memories. But what I will say is, um, after a few years, we moved, like I said, next door to Hawthorne, and I feel like it wasn't as bad there. But then what the gangs started. There was only like one or two gangs there, but now all the other gangs from Watts and Compton and South Central, now they start coming out there to set up shop, to sell dope and to do this and to do that. And so now you're getting a more influx of just um, different people. And so I would say it's about that time the latchkey kid kicked in around 11. I remember my mom, she had got off welfare and she was trying to, take care of me. And she got a job working nights at the hospital. And so that's when I feel like it started, my life started to take a turn, because in one sense it was good. She got financial security, but on the other hand, now I come home from, middle school and no one's there, right? There's no babysitter, there's no parental guidance. It's just me, two cats, the TV, and eventually it just turned into me just, man, smoking weed, drinking, and then getting involved in criminal and gang lifestyle, and just it just took off from there.
Let me ask you something, because I hear you say latchkey kid so many times, right? But for the audience that don't know what that is, can you describe that for us? What is a latchkey kid?
Yeah, so the latchkey kid term is basically someone who has a key like to the house or to the apartment, and then you come home and it's like there's no one there. Maybe sometimes some people do have someone, but it's like you have to be the one to get home, right? Like, you look at nowadays people, the kids that get picked up from school, they get Ubered. Back then it was like, get here how you get here. Like, sometimes my mom gave me money for the RTD, the rough, tough, and dangerous, the bus system. Sometimes I had a bike, sometimes I walked, and it was like when you get home, you got your key and you
Figure it
just
out.
go. Yeah, you figure it out.
It's crazy
Um,
that you say that because, you know, my son, my stepson, we go to the same, I went to the same middle school. He goes to that school that I went to, right? And I live maybe not that far away from that same school that the same distance, right? I walk to school back and forth. He doesn't do that. You know what I'm saying? For me, it's like walk. But in this generation, it's like, no, Uber, like go pick them up. Like and I'm like, what's going on? So I think I had a lot of judgment at first, but now it's like I'm adapting to the new generation, and I guess we don't want latchkey kids, right? And I guess you'll describe why we may not want that real soon. So you're a latchkey kid. 11 years old, 12 years old, raising yourself on one hand is good because your mom is finding financial security. She's off of welfare and like, I'm going to figure this out. And I think my son is going to figure it out at the same time, but that's not the case. So describe the next step in your journey.
So for me, like now looking back, I can see like I felt lonely, I felt abandoned, I
Mm,
had low self-esteem, I didn't love who I was, and I was trying to fit in. I was trying to find something to fill that void. I felt fear at night. You hear gunshots, you're watching America's Most Wanted. That's kind of like scaring me a little bit because, no one's there. You're hearing the ghetto bird or the helicopter back then from things that's going on. Gang violence is at a all-time high. You got the crack area. It's going on in the city, and I'm running around. I have no restrictions. I can go almost anywhere I want. I can do whatever I want. And so I started going to school, acting out, right? For attention, spitwise in the teacher, getting into fights, fuck you, this, that, just um, really just trying to get that attention and really asking for help in my own way, even though I didn't know how to ask for it. And you talk about walking to school, I would ditch school and ride my bike up Rosecrans to Manhattan Beach and then go all the way down to Venice Beach. You know what I mean? You're talking about like bike treks, you know what I mean? And so from there, it just led to me just, man, using drugs, hanging out, committing crimes, and before you know it, man, I got caught for shoplifting, and then got out from jail from the little detention center. My mom paid a little fine, and then next thing you know, still just like hanging out. I like to say like back then I was trying to juggle play both sides of the fence, right? And
yes,
there's an old saying that says you can't serve like two masters, right? So on
yes,
one
sir.
end, when I played sports, I was around my positive friends, right? And we would go to church. We do the little church events at night, you know what I mean? Play games and do all that stuff. And I was real quiet and respectful when I was in people's homes because that's how I was raised. But then when I would go to the streets and I would hang out with the dudes in my neighborhood, I started doing what they were doing. And so next thing you know, I got caught for I think it was like graffiti or something. I'm arguing with moms at home. She doesn't understand the lifestyle. She's 32 years older than me, right?
Mm,
So at this time I can remember at like 12, she buys me a bright red hoodie. And I'm like, Mom, I can't wear that. She was like, why? I said, because there's Bloods in the neighborhood. There's Crips, there's essays. Like, she's like, what's that? I'm like, never mind. So we didn't really like get along. We had like a love-hate relationship. And so she went to court and said, he's not listening to me, he's unmanageable, lock him up. So
mm.
boom, I get introduced to the system. Now I'm in LP in Central Juvenile Hall. I go to
So wait,
camp.
wait a minute. So your mom said, "I can't control this kid. Lock him up."
Absolutely.
How's that
Absolutely.
affect you as a kid? Like, that's the one person who's
For
going
real.
to protect you. Obviously, that's probably a moment of desperation for her because she doesn't
Mhm.
know what to do. But obviously, as a kid, how are you feeling? You feel like your mom just gave up and rejected you?
Absolutely. It just infuriated me. I feel like it just gave me an extra drive of just like F you, F society, like, you know what I mean? And I remember like going into camp, and at this time I was already um, hanging out, I guess you could say, like gang banging in a sense, or hanging out, right? Doing things what other people are doing. I seen some dudes I didn't get along with, I'm getting into a fight, and I just got, exposed to the system. Now I get out, now I'm like, yeah, like this is cool, you know what I'm saying? Like I know what it feels like and have a little chip on my shoulder. Now I'm like, screw my mom and going to
Mm,
school. And so I remember when I got out, they put me into continuation school. Now, I got kicked out of there for smoking weed and not showing up. And the next thing you know, I go to a gang prevention like school where everybody there is on like probation and stuff like that. Mm. My homeboy that I grew up with, I wasn't from his neighborhood, but him and I'm like they say you hanging out with
you with
certain
them, you
people,
bang
it
with them.
just it right. And so um he got into it with some cats, and so I jumped in to help him. Now I get kicked out of there, and now I have to go to the probation office to check in with my probation officer and see my school teacher. Um, and then I want to say, like about 6 months later, my homeboy got jumped, and I just had all these feelings of rage. You know, my mom don't love me, this, that. I want to like make a name for myself. You know, Ice Cube's album is cracking. You got the Chronic. I'm listening to all this stuff. And I told that same dude, I was like, look, man, let me get that strap. And I got a gun and I walked in to a party and man, I just let the clip blow, man. I was trying to just kill everything.
How old are you
Um,
at
I,
this point?
I was 16 at this time.
Mm.
I
Mm.
was just trying to kill everything on the other side of that gun. And as I look back and think about it in that moment, it's like every shot was like my pain coming out. And
Mm.
like it was like a release of just, you know, you don't love me, never met my father, lonely, like all of these different things were like came out like in that moment. And I want to say like the next day, which was, well, this was like at 3 in the morning. And so um, my dumb ass ended up going out for some walk for a little bit longer and then ended up coming back home. And so they kicked in the door on Christmas Eve of
Mm.
1993.
Wow. Christmas Eve. So, I mean, for me, one of the big things that stood out. I mean, many of the things that you just said stood out. But your mom tried to do something, right? And then
Mhm.
you came home. What was the relationship like once you came home? Like, how did she, react? Because you came home to your mom, right? Like after you got out the first time,
Mhm.
you came home to your
Mhm.
mom. And
Yeah,
like, how was
yeah.
that?
It
And one
was
other thing I want to ask you after
mhm.
that, another follow up, because we do these interviews and the most important part of these interviews, we talk about the childhood, what led to the incarceration. And there's other kids going through this, and there's parents, like your mom, who
Mhm.
don't know how to connect with their child going through it. But you can look back and say, well, this is what I was feeling. This is what I needed to hear. This was what I was looking for. So talk to that parent also who has a child who may be crying out for attention, or that kid who may be watching this who doesn't know how to ask their mom, see me, hear me, love me, right? Talk to them.
Absolutely. So my relationship with my mom at that time, like it was tumultuous, right? It was like a love-hate relationship. And it was like, you know, she'd go to work, you know, I'd invite girls and, you know, some of my buddies over and, you know, we'd drink her beer and try to fill it back up with water. It was like the party spot. And she'd say it smells like weed in here. And I'd be like, so, and so it wasn't good energy, right? And so when I look back, what I noticed is like what I needed was this was another big thing. My mom did everything she could to put me into sports, right? In baseball and the Pop Warner football, right? And then there was times she couldn't pay, and some of the coaches would like help her out and so that I could play. But then my mom never came to any of my games.
Mm.
Like I could remember only like one or two games, and I remember those were like the two best games of you know, um, of my life because my mom was there. And I remember feeling like that loneliness again and that rejection and that abandonment when all of my teammates, they have their brothers, their sister, their dad, their uncle, their cousin, or this or that. And then they're always asking me, hey, Matt, where's your mom? Where's your dad? And then after a while, they stop asking, right? And so I just became like numb to that. And I definitely feel like if my mom could have you know, made some time to be at some of my games or it definitely would have helped. And just if we could have spent more time together to get to know each other, right? It's a trip when we didn't have any money, like before being a latchkey kid, we did things together. We go camping, we go, you know, uh, to the beach. Like we do things together, you know what I mean? And then boom, once she got that job, it was like everything changed where it's like we didn't do as many things together, and just that relationship gap with her not being able to understand what was going on in the neighborhood, and what I was going through as a teenager with navigating my identity and being insecure and all of those things. Um it just wasn't a good mix.
All right. So you let off the whole clip. Every pain, everything you cried out to, you was just trying to kill it all. That was your therapy in that moment, you know, and it led you to prison at 16 years old. Talk about that. How was that experience?
But what were the charges in the sentence also, just out of curiosity?
Thank you for that, Stephen.
So I was tried as an adult. Uh, I was given I was tried as an adult for second degree murder and three attempted murders, and I was given I took a plea deal for 15 years to life. And so um, man, I went to juvenile hall, went to Y, and then I went to prison. And I basically just grew up, in prison. And man, I can remember those first few days, just like coming out of that fog of like dang, like what is like, can I go home? And you're just isolated. The first 72 hours, you're like isolation. You can't see nobody. You're just like in a box. You're just in a cell. And I remember crying, and I remember just like being frustrated and just, you know, just in disbelief. And from there, I don't know, it's just like taking one day at a time, and I just found a way to like figure it out, I guess. It was definitely like it was weird, right? And I could say this now, and I have discussions with people now that I've been out for 8 years, like it's almost like my brain is like telling myself like that experience never happened, right? It's weird that PTSD kicks in, and then there's times where it really does kick in, and I understand like, some of the hardships that I went through. Um, yeah,
Mm.
that was a rough ride for sure.
How long did you stay angry? And when did you begin to free yourself inside those walls?
Hmm. Man, I was angry for a while, for some years, and I think it's something that tends to happen on, and after like I feel like 10 years, right? It's like that 10-year mark, something clicks where you're like, this is real. Like you see enough things, and you're like, this is real. And if I don't get my stuff together, like I'm gonna stay in here, right? And like around that 10-year mark, right? Like they say, like the brain like fully develops, right? Because you figure in the 10-year, I'm about 26. So I want to say around like 26, 27, 28, the brain, you know what I mean? I finally gotten my GED. And so around that time, I started going to college. I was around other cats that had more time than I did, and they were like, you've seen them like change from like, you know, selling dope to doing this, to doing that, to like going to school, and it just became like cool in a sense to go to school at this particular time when I was in Soledad. And there was a lot of guys there that, like I said, I had seen at other places, and just you see them like really going after it. And so I want to say like around that time I started to transform. I was fortunate where I had a celly, older celly that had encouraged me to get my GED, and I had this fear that I wasn't smart enough. And so
Mm.
once I overcame that and I got my GED, then I was like, man, I could do this if I, if I keep studying. And so from there, he introduced me to the mental health department, which was hard to do back then because you had to be in the mental health department or be what they call triple CMS. And so I was able to, they would always take like maybe one or two GPs. And so I was able to get in there and start doing like some of the cage your rage anger management and get exposed to some of that stuff. And then I I got blessed where it's like I developed a rapport with some of the mental health staff. And next thing you know, I started co-facilitating groups. Unbeknownst to me, I started getting free therapy. Like I'm working alongside licensed clinical social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists, and now I'm in their office and we're like game planning on our self-esteem group or, what topics we're going to cover. And then it would flip to where they start asking me about my stuff and what I was going through. And like I said, I ended up getting free therapy and it just helped me to really like transform. And from there, I just like took off where I just started like facilitating groups, creating groups, and just college degree while I was in there. And I just really like started to live into uh like my purpose and just be confident with um who I was, even though traumatic childhood.
I love what you just said there about, people think they're in prison. It's an end or it's a sentence where it's like they just got to do their time and be punished and stagnant in life, right? But you said you found your purpose in prison,
Mm.
right? And I loved how you said after 10 years the brain developed because you were a child when you went into prison. And then you get out, you go into prison, the 10 years, the frontal cortex of your brain develops, you become a little more mature. You realize, I don't want this. There's other guys who are doing something with their life. And just, to put such a different angle, a lot of people will say, like, hey, prison saved my life, and for you, you found your purpose. And I love that, sometimes God has to take us through a necessary journey because some of us are more thick-headed than others. You grew up in a bad part of LA without any parental supervision, it sounds like. And if you didn't go to prison, maybe you would be dead right now. So you look back, right? Hindsight's 2020, but all these little steps were laid and preordained by God to get you where you are today. So I just love that you said you found your purpose in prison.
Yeah.
I want to add to that is, um, man, you're right. I remember asking my mom like why she named me, and she said it was, from Matthew in the Bible, but she decided to have one T instead of two T's, right? And going to church coming up, right? And so I vividly remember this. There was a time I was taking some dudes to get some drugs, and some Crips rolled up and broad daylight. And literally I was like 5 feet away from the gun in the middle of the day. And they just started shooting. And I was closest to the gun. I remember I freeze and just looked at the gun, like, dang, got a 38. That's crazy. Like just looking at it. And then I finally like got down and the dude that was furthest away from the gun ended up getting shot. And we ended up taking him to the hospital where my mom worked at, right? Um, and I think of another time I was out in the ocean, high as hell, boogie boarding. It's rip tides, it's 4 to 5 feet waves, and I damn near drowned. And I like blacked out and somehow like came up. So um, it's just these different little things, like when you talk about like purpose and God, and I feel like He like was protecting me, and like I kept meeting the right people. You know what I mean? It was a trip. Like one time I can remember being at Donovan. I'm like 19. I'm working uh PIA, and it was like they were in the process of like fixing different things. So you wouldn't work every single day at this time. And so the day that I had to work, there was a riot on the yard, but I'm behind the wall. And then, but 2 days before that, I didn't go to work. So I would have been on the yard and I would have been involved. So it was just like little things like along the way, like it was crazy, man. And I'm definitely, prison was a blessing because I found my purpose, I found my passion, and I was able to forgive, myself. I was able to forgive my mom, and just yeah, all of those things. So it did in many ways. It shaped who I am today.
Mm. So you said you had a 15 years to life sentence. You're sitting here with us right now. How long did you actually do?
So in total, I did 24 years straight.
Wow.
24 years straight.
Mhm.
Man, that's a blessing. And I know people like, where's the blessing in 24 years? Where's the blessing?
I know, right?
Because back then life meant life. I remember going to court and my lawyer telling me whether it's 5 to life or 50 to life, don't take life because life means life, right? But you're sitting here today. So how was that experience? Briefly tell us about for those who don't understand the board system, because 15 to life, you were eligible for parole after 15 years, but you did 24 years. So tell us about that process.
Yeah, the board, man, whew, it's a triggering, very stressful process. Like you go into this boardroom and it's like a long table. You feel like you're in court. They're recording you. You got the DA in there, or sometimes the DA's in the other room, or they're on Skype. And you just feel like you're being resentenced all over again. And it can go on from anywhere from an hour to 5 hours. And let me backstep and say this. Before you go, you have to meet with a forensic psychiatrist or psychologist. And when you meet with them, way back into your childhood.
You say that again because you cut out. You
I
met
said
with a
before,
forensic psychologist.
yeah, you meet with a forensic psychologist, and
Mhm.
man, they dive into your childhood. They ask you all type of different questions, and then they formulate their report, and that report weighs heavy on if you go home or not. So that's the first step. Then you go to the board, and they're trying to use what the psych is saying against you, twist your words, and they're masters of just listening to everything that you say because they get hundreds of hearings and they have trainings, they have degrees, right? Many of them are ex-police officers or attorneys. And then I only get to go once every 4 years, once every 3 years. So they're just much more experienced. And I can just remember like feeling like nervous, feeling anxiety, and then not being able to really articulate like how I went from being a quote normal kid to taking someone's life. That was a hard process to really articulate. And then they're talking about, your write-ups, I had a lot of 128s, mutual combat, cell phones, this. And so now that's coming into play like, oh, you're going to group, but then you have this write-up and you're a danger to society. Um, and so Man, it's a brutal process. And then once you get found suitable, if you get found suitable, you have to wait 120 to 150 days, and you're walking around on pins and needles waiting for the governor to say yes or no, because he has the power to revoke um, your suitability. So it's definitely like a stressful process for sure. But what I found is once I was living into my purpose, once I began to internalize my transformation and understand my triggers, understand, um, my coping mechanisms and insight and remorse, it just became easier. And that board process, it wasn't as stressful because I knew my story, I knew what was going on, and it made it just a little bit easier, but it was still like a very stressful process for sure.
So you came home, you got to the board, you went through it obviously a couple of times from 15 years to 24 years. You went to the board a few times, but you finally made it home. So tell us about the purpose that you're now living out.
So now I'm a substance use counselor, and I work with men and women on parole. Um, I work with two nonprofits, Garden 31 and Homework SD, which works with, Homework SD works with justice involved men and women. And I facilitate, um, we also partner with the union trades and help men and women get careers. We do a lot of community, civic engagement things in the community. And then there's also Garden 31. Through them, I go into East Mesa Juvenile Hall to work with the YDAs, and sometimes the garden in the school. And Man, I just like and mentoring others, there's things that, as you guys know, I'm sure you guys do as well, things that don't get posted on social media or things that, we don't advertise. It's just doing the work, calling somebody up, checking on them, or, sometimes giving them a ride, or sometimes just being an ear and, taking them to the lake and having a bike ride, or, whatever it may be, just service. And um one thing I learned in there was like, this is real talk. Hurt people, right? And healed people heal people.
Mm.
And so once I began to like heal and again really connect to like my humanity and understand like the ramifications of my actions and the ripple effect of positive choices and negative choices, I began to just give that back. You know what I mean? And so I started just been out here doing the same thing, just helping people and trying to put that positive energy in the world and just help people. If I can connect them to the right resource, if I could, give them some encouraging words, I try to do it. Like, you know what I mean? That's what it's about because s- I got that while I was inside. I ran across some good people that helped save me and they helped me and they poured into me. And so now uh, I want to pour into people and I am pouring into people.
I love that you said that, right? There's a saying you can't pour from an empty cup, right? People
Mhm.
pouring into you, you pour into others from an overflow, and you got to fill yourself first before you can pour into other people. Quick question though, I know a lot of people, right, when they get out, you got out 24 years later, Will got out 16 years later. I know Will did, but not everyone does. Did you hit the ground running, or was it a process for you to become involved in everything you are today? I know you're involved in six, seven different things and organizations and helping all these men and women, or did you have to kind of climb your way up the workforce when you got out and start from the bottom? Or did you just take off running as soon as you got out? Because I'm sure there's some practical applications, people out there that know that they're going to get out or they just got out and are like maybe they're lost on what the next steps are. What did you do as soon as you got out?
That's a good question. I always tell people everybody's journey is different. Um, and I didn't come out and just elevate like that and just like take off. I got out. Um, I'll be honest, my mom was supposed to have some stuff saved up for me. Her ex-husband ran through it. She had minimal um resources. On this, like it's crazy how life is where it just shows up and it tests you to show you where you're at, right? Learned years ago, a true measure of a man is not during moments of calm, but during moments of adversity, right? When there's things going on. So I get out the first day and I surprise my mom and she's intoxicated. Her ex-husband, I don't like him. Me and him get into it. Two childhood friends that were like holding me and was like, "Oh, like you just let it go. Like, you know what I mean? Like tomorrow's another day." Long story short, the next day she left, went to go stay with my aunt. Come to find out, he had put a knife to her throat like 5 days before. And so you talk about like just timing, right? And so I say all that to say that I didn't get out to this just perfect situation, right? So for me, I had to learn technology. I knew a little bit of it, and I began just humbling myself and just asking questions, learning how to use my phone, learning how to set up an email. And my first job was working at a gas station at Circle K. I was the first person that got a job working down the street from Amity. And from there, I worked at like a sign company. Then I did the gas station. I just did both of them at one time, at the same time. And I tried Lyft and Uber and just um, optical. Like I was just trying to keep finding work and I just had to like grind it out. But at the same time, I was still available and helping other people so that they could find their passion so they could win. Even though I really wasn't winning like that when I first got out, I had to like really like grind and I felt like had to grind partly because of like all of the harm that I had caused and all of the bad choices. I just felt like, well, this is, you made bad choices. This is what it is when you get out, and you have to go through this, you know what I mean, in order to get to something better.
You know, I wanna point something out and give you your flowers because like Steven said, he said I hit the ground running, but man, I hit the ground in MCRP and met Matthews. And a lot of people tell me, oh, you don't look like you were ever incarcerated. And that's like one of the best compliments that I can receive. But when I hear that, the first person I think of is Matthew, right? Like that's the first person I think of because you were a counselor, you were, running the groups inside of MCRP, and Matthew saw something in me, and I didn't even know he was incarcerated. That's okay. That's the teacher. You know what I mean? Like he was running the all the groups and all the classes, and all I knew was just ask questions. I'm free and I want to learn, and I don't know what I'm gonna do. But Matthew within those groups was like, man, he had another friend who we all know, Jason, one of my mentors, and he was like, man, you need to talk to this guy. You know what I'm saying? Like, you need to talk to this guy. Just came home, and I didn't know nothing. But Matthew saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. I just was opening up, trying to learn and better myself. And he introduced me to Jason, who ended up introducing me to Mark, who ended up introducing me to Steven. And now we have, you know, because of Steven giving me a job at the gym, I have my wife. I have my life. I have, PostP. We're going to Africa. We're helping all these people. Like there's just so much blessings that have come my way and so many things that I've been able to do for other people. But it all started with Matthew seeing something in me. And I appreciate that.
We can't hear you, Stephen.
You went out, Stephen.
We can't hear you.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you're
there
good.
you go.
So sometimes it just takes one person believing in you, right? And so I want to thank you, Matthew, because you obviously, without you, maybe not have encouraged Will and all this stuff that you see that's going on around the world. We can also attribute Matthew just seeing stuff in Will. So there's a
Thank you.
saying, I mentor this young guy. I was meeting with him this morning. And, this story I love to tell because it's true for all of us, right? You'll never meet a man of great faith and great courage that hasn't been through great trials, right? Because trials reveal what's in you and build that faith builder. So these trials have made us men of great faith. So this is what we had to go through. It was our calling. And now we can be great and mentor other people because of what we've been through. So I love your story. I love what you've done. I love what you're doing for the community. And like Will said, the ultimate compliment can't, when I met you, I was like, oh, this is Will's mentor. He's just a counselor. Then he told me he did 24 years. I'm like, 24 years, what did you do? You know what I mean? I can't tell. And so it's awesome
Correct.
to see because I just thought you were Will's mentor and groomsman like another Jason, right? Jason's over here, a fire captain. And I just thought you were that status with Jason. So uh kudos to you and the transformation. I'm sure many people will never believe your story, but that's what makes the story so great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, something about like, and going back to that purpose, right? It's something that like a gift that I got is just being able to like connect with people and see things, in people. And it also ties in, I know Will can relate too. In prison, you have to learn for survival purposes how to read energy and body language and things that are going on. And so just from growing up in the streets, in prison, and then going to groups is just something that like a gift and a passion of just being able to have those conversations and see someone that's authentic, someone who's hungry, and someone who really wants something more for their lives and is willing to like question things. And that's what I saw in Will's like, and it wasn't easy, he'd give you some pushback, like, no, no, I don't agree with that. What about this? And what about that? And I'm like, yeah, okay. And what other options are available? And then, the next day we come and then someone else would say something based on the prompt that I gave him. And then Will would be listening like, okay, that's a different perspective. And you could just see like he was ready and willing. And so I just want to, give that back to you as well and just say that, that old saying, we can lead a horse to water, but we can't force him to drink. So kudos to you for the willingness, and now you're giving it back. You know what I mean? Um,
Sure.
I want to double back just to really like tie this in. So you asked earlier like how my relationship was with my mom. Um, and I remember getting out and my mom was drunk and I was high. We got into an argument and she was looking at me and she looked at me like she hated me. Like she wanted, like if she had a gun, she would kill me. And it took me years to figure this out. So when I was 21, I received a letter while I was on lockdown. I kept asking her about my dad. I still have the letter today. She said in that letter that she was raped in South Central Los Angeles, and that's why I had never met my father. And so I was able to piece together the connection and see that as my features began to change, she started to see her victim, miser, in my features. And she had this love-hate relationship on why she kept me. And I
Mm,
was triggering her.
mm,
And yeah.
wow.
And so full circle, now when I come back and I'm going through my transformation, I'm like, man, she did love me.
Mhm.
She's my hero. She went
That's
through a lot. She's a
great.
beast.
Yeah. The love she went through just to alone keep you, and then the love to raise you, and all when it's just bringing up those painful, traumatic memories to her, and you're, I'll say this, since you're a rape baby, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you didn't get aborted because what you're doing for society and you're doing for this world is amazing. And so kudos to your mom for keeping you because yeah, I mean, it's funny, I'll say this again, about our parents. First we demonize them, then we humanize them, then we sympathize with them, right? Because now you go back, you see your mom's trauma she was dealing with in raising you, and now you go back, you're like, wow, what a badass. You know what I mean? Before you're like, this lady hates me, I'm done with her. And so that in itself is an amazing testimony of you and your mom's
Mhm.
relationship.
Yeah. So definitely what I wanted to say before we close out, what's next for Mr. Edwards, right? You're in college right now. What's next for you? What's the next step on your journey?
Man, I wish I knew. That's one of the things I'm working on is I'm more of a spontaneous person. And I'll be honest, I'm like figuring it out. I'm figuring it out, but I'm currently at San Diego State through Project Rebound, and next year, uh, I'm projected to graduate with a bachelor's in sociology. Um, and I don't, Sometimes I ask God, like, man, what's next? What do you want me to do? Sometimes talk to Jason or others. And so, to be honest, I'm not sure, but I know that I'm going to continue this path of transformation. I'm going to continue this path of helping others. I'm going to continue just that ripple effect and keep um, working on myself for sure.
Definitely, man. Well, I know I'm excited to see the next step for you to get that bachelor's degree so I can go to the graduation. I appreciate you. I love you. Thank you for being on this episode. I can't wait for people to hear your story. Man, thank you so much. Thanks for being here.
Thank you guys. Thank you for the opportunity. And man, yeah, I'm glad we were able to make it happen. And yeah, I think the last thing I'll say is that, life isn't going to be easy, but I learned just to take one day at a time. And like you were saying, Stephen, there's a point where we don't agree with everything our parents are doing, but they're human beings. There's no manual on how to raise a child, and can definitely say that one day you're going to look back and see how great your parents were, or all of the positive things that they, tried to do for you. So it's just, yeah, one of those things. But yeah, thank you guys as well. And you have a great rest of your day.
Definitely. So once again, I'm Will,
And I'm Steven,
and
and
this
this
is the
is the
Post P
Post P
Chronicles.
Chronicles.
Hey, what up, say? Yeah.